Hey, welcome back to leadership class. Today we're going to talk about one of the most important aspects of leadership, and that is leading positive change. How do you make changes without blowing everything up? So I'm going to share my screen here with you. How do we lead change positively? That is the big question for us today. Lewis and Clark, the great explorers, Thomas Jefferson, you know, bought a lot of property, the Louisiana Purchase, and they wanted to go explore it. And they were looking for an east-west river that would take you all the way to the ocean out California way. And so they did this thing. They brought their canoes. They went down the Missouri River and stuff like that. And so things were really good all the way through until they got right about in here. And when they got here, what they found, they climbed to the top of a mountain, taking their canoes to the top of the Rocky Mountains, thinking that they'd find a river, then they could just zip right on down. And when they got to the top, this is all they saw was more and more and more mountains. They thought that they were going to just kind of have smooth sailing all the rest of the way, and then they realized, well, we can't do this with canoes anymore. We're going to have to go a different route. We're going to have to climb. We're going to have to get wagons. We're going to have to get mules. We'll have to do something different. There's a wonderful leadership book called Canoeing the Mountains. And the idea there is that sometimes we get to a place and we think that it's going to be this, but it ends up being that. And we have to adapt our ability, our attitude, our perspective, our plan. We change the plan, we adapt that, and so that we can get to the ultimate destination. So if you get hung up on your plan, just on exactly has to be like this, and we don't, we're not willing to adjust, then we're going to get ourselves into trouble. Flexibility is always the greatest ability, right? So basically, the idea from Lewis and Clark is that we just have to expect the unexpected and then adjust our plan according to the unexpected. Reality comes in its own terms, and so we have to embrace reality as it is, not as we wish it would be. Our best friend actually is looking at the real facts and saying this is really what it is, and then embrace reality and see now what do we do in light of that reality to have the best positive outcome. Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed unless it's faced. So we need to confront the brutal facts, the bad news as well as the good news. Sometimes we want to whitewash everything and make it all more rosy than what it really is, and that doesn't help us. We need to be honest with ourselves. So let me give you a few principles for making change. Number one is change is life, and life is change. I mean, it really is. I mean, like always, life is changing. Even your skin cells are changing. You're shedding skin cells. You shed a few thousand skin cells just as you've been watching this video, and so have I. There are just dead skin cells all over the place. Just think about that for a minute. We're changing. Like if you didn't change, you'd die. And change is just a fact of life. And so we just have to embrace that. Don't be so worked up when somebody is proposing a change because that's just normal, right? And so we just have to accept that. And Benjamin Franklin said, when you're finished changing, you're finished, you're through, right? So you got to keep on adapting, keep on growing. I heard, an Old Testament scholar just the other day, John Oswalt, who was in his 80s, and he was talking about the new thing that he had just learned. A great Bible scholar who had studied the Bible deeply for decades, like over 60 years, and yet he would found something brand new that he had learned. I thought, man, I want to be like that when I'm in my 80s. When you're finished changing, you're through. Even if you try not to change, you're going to change anyway. The question is, what kind of change are you going to do? Are you going to do a change of progression, a change of growth, a change of renewal, or are you going to do the change of decay? Because either way, there's a change. So there was a community that I passed through many times as I was visiting my mother in Ohio, and we'd travel through this little village, and that little village was determined not to change. Everything was exactly the same. For like 20 years, I'd go through the village, and it was exactly the same, except for it wasn't because eventually the little stores closed down, the houses were abandoned, it was decrepit, and by the last time I went through that little village, it was like a ghost town. It changed. It changed all right. It just changed through decay and erosion. So the question isn't whether or not you're going to change. The question is, what kind of change do you want to have? I like this idea. See, if we're bound by tradition, that's just pure pressure from the dead. Now, tradition is the living faith of the dead. You can actually honor tradition, but traditionalism is the dead faith of the living. And so, if you're caught up in the trap of traditionalism, you're not going to make the necessary changes you need to make to get to where you need to go. I like this. Eric Shinsky, a retired general, said, if you don't like change, you're going to like your relevance even less. You got to change to be relevant. Number two, not all change is positive. Just because somebody's going to change something doesn't mean that it's good. So you have to have wisdom when you make your changes. Keith Drury said it this way: you can change without growing, but you cannot grow without changing. So just because you're rearranging the furniture doesn't necessarily mean you're making a good positive change. You want to use insight, purpose, and wisdom in that change. Before you make a change, then you want to ask this question: is this really the right idea? And even if it's the right idea, it might not still be time to do it because maybe you're doing it for the wrong reason. Is it the right reason? Or is it the right time? And am I going about it in the right way? So it could be the right idea, but you're going about it the wrong way, and then that sabotages your change effort. It might be the right idea, but you're doing it for the wrong reason, and therefore it becomes an ego kind of thing. It's the right idea, but the wrong time, and it will abort. It won't happen like if you do it prematurely. So you have to do this kind of thing. So the right time, the right way, and all that, this is where your leadership team comes in, your board or whatever team it is that you consult. And what you want to do is consult with them about goals and boundaries. Like, what are the goals? What are the things we're trying to accomplish? And what would violate that boundary? And so if you're shooting for the wrong goal, or you are not going for a goal at all, or if you're violating boundaries, that's going to sabotage your change efforts, right? So like if your leadership team will come along with you as long as you're accomplishing the goals that you've agreed upon and you are abiding by the boundaries that you've agreed upon. If you haven't clarified your goals or your boundaries, that's a really important thing to do if you want to expect to make good changes later on. Third principle, change is always resisted. People don't like change. Mark Twain said the only one that likes change is a baby with a wet diaper. Even if it's a good change, it's going to be resisted. As a pastor, we did lots of stuff, building programs, stuff like that. It was always resisted, always resisted. There's this one time I heard a story. A friend of mine was actually a pastor in a church, an old country church that still had an outhouse in the back. And it was in Minnesota where this church was. And like in the winter, it's awfully cold to go out to the outhouse in the back. So there was a church meeting where they decided to have a business meeting to decide to put in indoor plumbing so they could have an indoor bathroom in their church. Well, it was going just fine in the meeting until one old guy raises his hand and he says, "Do you know what people do in those bathrooms, in that outhouse? Do you know what people do in that? Do you want people doing that in God's house?" And the whole thing got voted down. As far as I know, they still have their outhouse. So why do people resist change if it's always resisted? Why do they resist? Well, there's some reasons, some good reasons, some not so good reasons. Sometimes they resist change because of tradition, like Tevi on Fiddler on the Roof. Tradition, tradition. Like I'm just doing it because that's the way we've always done it, and I don't want to change. It's working just fine for me. And there's something comforting about tradition, right? Something that's unsettling when you make a change that changes a long-standing tradition. I think this is the reason why people got so upset when they started singing worship songs, of course, as newer songs instead of the old hymns, because of that idea. The old hymns were comforting for them. So, by the way, I suggest incorporating old hymns into your worship service to speak those words of comfort and stuff to people. Why would we want to rob them of that? But when tradition becomes traditionalism, people become frozen in the old pattern and they can't accept change. Sometimes the change is too much for them. Like they want to be comfortable. Now it's always going to be resisted. I mean, like every change is going to stretch people outside of their comfort zone. Like I liked the 8:30 service at my church, and then they got rid of the 8:30 service, and now I have to go to 9:30 service, and I don't like that. I'd rather be at the 8:30 service, but I came along with it. I made the change because I know it's probably for the best for the church and all of that kind of stuff. I moved out of my comfort zone. But when a change effort goes down, it's because the leader violates the zone of tolerance. So like there's a comfort zone and then there's a stretch zone. And if you go beyond the stretch zone, that's the zone of tolerance. You can take it up to the point, then it snaps, and then it's too much. And so, like for college students, for instance, I try to challenge them, but I want to challenge them to the place where they're going to implode and snap. So I want to take it up. I want to stretch them beyond what they think they can do, but not so much that it's impossible, and then they just cave in. And so you don't want to violate the zone of tolerance. You don't want to keep them in the comfort zone either. So basically, the idea is to take them just a little bit past their comfort zone and do that kind of change. Incremental changes usually work better than massive changes unless there's some major reason why it's better to do it in a massive kind of way. People resist change because they're afraid. They're afraid of the unknown. They don't know what the future is going to look like. They know what this is. They just don't know what this is. And sometimes people will tolerate some kind of what tolerable this that's not that great because the fear of what that could be. So like is just too much. So when we did the several building programs at our church, like I said, and people were always opposed to it because they were afraid of what it was going to look like on the other side. Now, once they were there, they were really happy to be there. But before they got there, they were really scared about it. Sometimes the reason why people oppose change is because they don't understand the reason why. And that's a communication issue on the part of the leader. It isn't about them being negative and critical and all that kind of stuff. It's about you just being fuzzy. You want to make sure that you sell them on the reason. Like if you're just doing this for the wrong reasons, they're going to sniff that out. And if you have the right reason, but they think you're doing it for the wrong reason, they're going to sniff that out too. So basically what you have to do is clarify the purpose. Just keep bringing the purpose. This is the reason why. It's to win the lost at any cost. It's to multiply disciples. It's to reach the rising generation. Whatever it is, that's the main thing of why we're going to ask them to make this hard change. You want to bring that purpose up front into the frontal lobes. Sometimes people resist change just because it's the wise thing to do. It's a stupid idea. And wise people are going to resist that. What? You're doing that? That's stupid. That's just dumb. I'm really glad that my board shut down some of my ideas. Some of my ideas were horrible ideas. I thought they were great ideas at the time, but my board shut them down because collectively they had wisdom that I didn't have. So they may not be your enemy when they're resisting your change. They might be your best friend, saving you a lot of heartache and regret. By the way, what's the difference between great faith and stupidity? I asked John Maxwell that one time. I was in a meeting with him, and he says, Oh, about 5 years. But if you think you're doing God's will, you prayed that through, you got that, you have faith, just go for it. Just go for it, all right? And and godly wisdom with faith will prevail. Fourth principle of change, people adapt to change in different kinds of ways. Some people are early adapters, some people drag their feet, some people are never going to get with the program. So you have the people, the innovators that make the change. There's less than 3% of those people. You have people that early adopt. There's an early majority, a late majority. Then you have the people that slagging along behind. You have people way over here that are never going to make the change and they're going to get upset and leave. And so that's just what it is. And you just let them go and bless them and let them go to some place where there's no change happening. You've got to make changes to make progress. Okay, so what happens is a lot of times an innovator will cast the vision, and only these guys get on board, and you only have like about 15, 16% of the people, but the other 84% are over here. And if you are an impatient innovator, you're going to think that these people are your enemies, and you're going to start fighting with these people. That's the worst thing you could possibly do. You want to win these people. Don't make them your enemies. If you fight with these people, then all of these majority people are going to go over with the laggards and oppose your change, and then they are your enemies, right? It's like the knight that the warrior knight that came to the king and said, "Your Majesty, we have conquered our enemies to the east and our enemies to the west." And the king said, I didn't know we had enemies to the west. And he said, we do now. So these early majority and late majority people, they're actually your friends. They're just helping you clarify your purpose, right? Even the laggards can do that too. Some of those guys, though, they're never going to come along with the program. You don't let them win, but unless it's wisdom, and then those guys influence these people. But anyway, that's how you make change. So these people that are here in the middle, these are your healthy skeptics. Now I flipped it out over. This is exactly the opposite here. This time the chart goes this direction. You got your cynics way over here that just don't like the idea no matter what you do. Your trailblazers over here, let's go, let's go, let's go. But you have the healthy skeptics in the middle that make sure that this is a good idea, right? If you didn't have these people, this guy would drive the wagon off the rails, over the top of the cliff. You'd keep trying to run canoes in the mountains. Okay, so when you're ready to make a change, there are forces for the change, and there are restraining obstacles to the change, and they go back. They're push against each other. And so this is where it is, or this is where you want to go. And so let's say you're trying to move it forward. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. And so the question is, what are the restraining forces and why are they? So if the restraining forces are things like wisdom, if the restraining forces are things like you haven't thought it all the way through yet, or maybe it's about timing, then you need to adapt to that and canoe the mountains in the right kind of way. But you want to make sure if you're making good positive change that your driving forces are outweigh the restraining forces. If not, then it might be the wrong reason, the wrong time, the wrong place. So you have to rethink that. And if by chance you have to make this change in order to live with yourself, but they're not going to make the change because they are so stuck in traditionalism, then probably the kindest thing you could do would be to resign and go somewhere else where you can make the changes that you need to make and let somebody else that just wants to be a chaplain to the small dwindling congregation to let them just run that, and you don't have to then fight so much, and you just let them win. Sometimes you have to shake the dust off your feet. Now, what about critics? Because every change is going to receive criticism. If you don't like critics, then don't do ministry and don't lead change because you'll get plenty of critics no matter what you do, right? There are those that are going to make things happen. There are those that will criticize what happened. There are those that around wonder what happened, right? um, the thing is that your critics are your clarifiers, particularly that middle group, the skeptics, the healthy skeptics. They're going to ask questions. And even those that have the wrong ideas in mind, they still can clarify things. Because see, they're going to make you think through something. And if you haven't thought all the way through it and you're trying to sell them on something that hasn't been totally vetted and thought through, then it's going to derail somewhere along the line. So basically, your critics are your friends because they clarify your purpose and they help you to know. So if you can get through the critics and then you have a red hot passion about this thing, then you know that you got something really good, particularly if that middle group is coming with you. Now, if they don't go with you, critics are clarifying it the other way that it's the wrong time, the wrong place, the wrong reason. So, if you're going to implement change, what do you do? Number one is you clarify your purpose. Why are we doing this? You put that front in the frontal lobes and you keep on bringing that back. Only the leader can do this and they can cast it, then others can do it too. But if you're not clarifying the purpose, then nobody else. If you don't know why you're doing this, nobody else is going to know. Second thing to implement change is to earn trust, to accumulate change, to make change. Every change that you make is going to cost you something. So I have to get out my wallet and I'm going to have to pay for that change relationally, right? Because like again, change is always opposed, and so you have to cash in on the change because you're going to cash in some goodwill when you make the change. But if you have a lot of relational change in your pocket, you can do that and not go bankrupt. So, like every time you do, say, a funeral for somebody, and it's a good funeral, you call the person by the right name and you bless them, that family loves you because you did that kind of thing and you gain some relational change. Every positive interaction you have with somebody, you make a deposit in the relational tank, right, or in the bank account. If you every good thing that you do, if you make a change and it works and it goes well, then you get a lot of change for that, right? It's oh, that's awesome. I love this, right? And then people just give you the change. If people come since you've been there, they're going to give you their change, and particularly if they are younger than you, like like the those who have been there longer than the change agent and are older than the change agent, they're the ones that are the hardest to process through and work with. But those who are younger and have been there in a less amount of time, those guys, they're going to just give you their change. But you can earn the change of the other folks too. You did have to earn that more slowly. It's trust change is what it is. But then at some point you're going to have to cash that in, like you do a building program. You're going to pave the parking lot. You're going to hire somebody. You're going to fire a staff member. Well, if you do that, you're going to give some change away. And you just want to make sure that you have change in your pocket. So the bottom line of this is not to manipulate, it's to love people. Because if you love people, you're going to have lots of change in your pocket. Everybody needs to be loved. The next thing I would say about implementing change is to honor the process. Change takes time. It takes a process. It has an approval process, an information communication process. That's the kind of processing it takes to make good change. So one time I was at a church, we were visiting with our family, and the pastor got up front and he said, "Everybody, hey, listen, next week we're going to take a vote on building a new fellowship hall. We're going to pave the parking lot and we are going to build a new fellowship hall. And if you are in favor of this, I want you to say, Praise the Lord." And nobody said praise the Lord. Well, except for my kids. They said, Praise the Lord. They were the only one. And one of my kids, he leans over and says, What's the matter with these people? Dad, don't they want a new fellowship hall? And I said, Apparently not, son. Apparently not. Well, it wasn't that they were against the fellowship hall. In fact, eventually they got one, but not with that pastor. They fired that pastor. They gave him the left foot of fellowship. So what happened? It was the right idea, but it was the wrong process. He didn't go about it in the right way. He didn't bring people along. This was the way he sprung it on them. He didn't tell the people that the vote at the board was 5-4. He didn't tell them how much it was going to cost. He didn't tell them how they were going to pay for it. All he said was, We're going to vote next week. And that was too abrupt. He didn't honor the process. And that's the reason why he quit being the pastor of that church. um, so, the one thing about honoring the process, what you want to do, there's things before you make the change. There's stuff when you're doing it, right? And then there's a result at the end. And so, like, if your pre-performance expectations, if you meet that ahead of time, and then you do a more than adequate performance, you're going to delight them at the end, right? They're going to be delighted with the change. If your pre-change efforts are unacceptable, like what happened with the guy that dishonored the process, well, then there's a less than adequate performance, right? And that creates dissatisfaction. And so if it's acceptable and adequate, they'll be satisfied. Shoot for the delight. Shoot for this. Don't go down here to the dissatisfied. So what that requires of you then is more than an acceptable process before the change begins and a more than adequate performance when the change is happening. If either one of these goes down, then you're going to take it downward in this one over here. We want to minimize disruption with your change. So, for instance, when we added a service, we didn't like take away the service that was already there. We just added another one to it. There was a Wednesday night prayer meeting, and we had somebody lead that. We could say, but we added small groups, and so we didn't take that away from them. What we did was we multiplied from that. The more you can minimize disruptions for people so their life is not disrupted as much, the better it is for people. Now, sometimes you have to disrupt. It just requires a major disruption. But the more you can minimize that internal thing. See, transition is the emotional stuff that happens inside of you. The change is the thing that happens. And so when you minimize disruption, you minimize the emotional transition stuff that causes people to resist the change. Now, you need to expect trouble along the way. Nothing goes as smoothly as you expect. Every building program I ever did cost more and took longer. There are people that get upset that you didn't think were going to be upset. I mean, there's just stuff that's going to happen that you just didn't count on. Expect that and just say, oh, there's one of those. Okay, well, there's that. And you just keep on going, keep on paddling your canoe. Whatever you do, don't let petty people win. Don't let pettiness prevail. If somebody's being petty, now I'm not talking about your clarifiers. I'm talking about the petty person that's gossiping, disrupting. The whole thing is going forward, but they're just sabotaging everything along the way. And they're criticizing and complaining. What you want to do with that person is you shrink them down to about this size, about 2 inches, and then you pick them up by the nape of the neck, particularly if they're just being hurtful in the things they say to you. And what you do is you have this little cage and you stick in your imagination, you put them inside the cage and you lock the cage and then just let them yap. They're not going to hurt you. You just keep on going then and do your thing. Don't let the petty people prevail and celebrate little wins along the way. Any tiny little win that you can get, you celebrate that. Celebrate because the going gets tough when you're making big changes and it gets hard and people get discouraged. But if you can find a win and you celebrate that, that is a beautiful thing. Now, one thing you can do when you're making changes is what I call unfreezing moves. There was a wonderful book out called this Unfreezing Moves. The idea is things are frozen in the way we're doing it right now. But the only way to get to a new form is to actually unfreeze. And when you unfreeze, it's all slushy. And when it's all slushy, it's messy and it gets muddy and murky and it's just really hard. It gets sloshy. But when it's unfrozen, that's when you can reshape it into a new thing and then you refreeze it again, right? So you don't want to stay in the slushy forever. You got to refreeze it into a new thing. Now, if let's say it's frozen over here, the way you unfreeze it is not to take your hammer and chisel, bam, 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 bam. That breaks them. It breaks them, and there are times, I suppose, where that's the necessary step to just totally catastrophize, throw a bomb or a hand grenade into it, and just mess it all up. And then rebuild from scratch, right? Like just bomb them and let it play out. But the better way to do it is to turn up the heat, turn up the temperature, and unfreeze certain patterns. So you can do this by implementing some new things. Like for us, the way we got a new church was we began to rent the high school about once a quarter, and we had church over there. And then they got used to church in a new place. And then when we built our new building, it was easier for them to make the transition from our old 100-year-old building to our brand new building. So it was an unfreezing move. Um, If you want to implement contemporary music into your virtual service, it's all traditional. Well, you do one song, right? Or you play the old song, playing a guitar with it. You do things that help unfreeze it so that they're not so rigidly opposed to it. Now, this is a Kotter's Steps for Leading Change. Kotter is an organizational genius. And basically what he says is this, that you want to create some urgency for the change. Like this is important and we got to do it. And this is the purpose and the vision, right? Now, if it's the right time, it's going to catch fire. And the way you want to do that is you find a coalition. These are some people that come along board with you, your early adapters that buy into your vision. And then you create together with these guys a vision for change that you communicate. Now, if it doesn't catch fire here, it's because you haven't done enough spade work or it's not the right time or whatever here. If you don't have anybody with you, if you're the only one doing the urgency and trying to do the vision, it won't work. You have to have somebody, you have to have some leaders who have influence, who have change in their pockets, relational change with the rest of the people, right? And so you communicate it, you empower, and then you do some quick wins. Now we get to the red. This is where things get harder, right? So the change part, this part gets enthusiastic, and so like people are excited about that until they hit the troubles and the challenges and all that. But you want to keep on building it, and you want to make it stick. And so the way you make it stick is by implementing something and then just giving it all you got to that, right? And keep on celebrating. So basically, what happens is with it, you build on the steps that go before that. If you want to study more about that, look up John Cotter and the change process. It's really helpful in that thing. Now, last thing, what about sacred cows? Like there are certain things that are just sacred cows, and boy, it's really hard to touch or whatever. I would just suggest this: sacred cows make gourmet hamburgers. They make gourmet hamburgers. So don't let the sacred cow win the day. You are called to do something. You are called to make a difference in the world. You are called to be a change agent. And for Jesus through the power of the Holy Spirit, if He put the vision in you, it's His vision, right? Not yours. If it's yours, it's hallucination. But if it's His vision, then that's His vision that's going to prevail. It will prevail, and God will see you through all the way to the end.